Hey, what's up, lightboltjoe here. Today we're going to discuss the 2017 horror prequel film Leatherface. This is a prequel to the 1974 film Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which then had the sequel. In this particular timeline, has the sequel of Texas Chainsaw, which came out in 2013. So Verna Sawyer Carson, we know, is the grandmother of Heather Sawyer, who Heather Miller, excuse me, who is played by Alexandra Daddario's character. We get that story of her inheriting the house from her late grandmother in the 2013 film. And so then what happens when she inherits it, but then Leatherface, aka her cousin Jed Sawyer, lives in the basement and does his stuff. So we know that that happens, right? But the question was, if he's her cousin, is Verna his mom? Is Verna his aunt? Like, how does this work? And so it's not explained because a character literally says, "What are you, his mom? What are you, his aunt? Does it even matter?" And it's one of those like jab kind of a things, but it makes sense to say it in regards to the story because you have no idea who the Sawyer family is. They could have relations with various family members. You have not a clue, and that's the mystery behind it all. So this is a prequel of Leatherface becoming Leatherface, how Leatherface became Leatherface, getting the mask, and Verna is referenced as his mom primarily throughout this. She calls him her, she calls him her son, my boy, stuff like that. So it's neat seeing the origins of another character as well, Verna, who we were introduced in the last film we just watched, which is a sequel to the first film. So it's really cool having this new timeline of events, having a correspondent, cohesive story. I'm all about the story. This is a very slow burn story. It's an hour and 27 minutes long, but it's a slow burn. It's not fast at certain points. It's not like exorbitantly, oh my God, I'm so bored. It's just a nice, I don't want to say the word calm because this ain't no calm film, but it's a nice and calm way of telling a story. That's the best way to say it. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, wonderful. So we start out in 1955 Texas, and the Sawyer family is starting to. They're celebrating Jed's birthday and give him a chainsaw, and he doesn't want to use it, to hurt the guy who's was trying to steal the pigs or something like that. But he winds up using it and like can't finish the job, if you will. So one of the cousins or one of the uncles, finishes the job, and we get a younger grandpa in this, which was very entertaining as well. Seeing another character. Um, the family then plays a trick to lure people into a trap, basically. And so Jed puts on this like pig costume and like goes on the road and like stops a truck, basically, as this guy and girl are like making out while driving. And then he lures her to this barn saying, "Help, I need help." And she's like, "Oh, a kid's in need, I have to help him." They set the traps in act. She is no longer with them. So it turns out that she is the sheriff's daughter, and he's freaking out. So he then takes the new law that Texas had in regards to child endangerment, takes all the Sawyer kids away. So Verna has no more kids in the house because she's the matriarch of the family at this particular moment. And so then we get another flash forward 10 years to 65. Jed is now Jackson, and he's in a mental health facility with other teens. And there's this new nurse who is there, and she wants to be, do better for the kids, and for the teens, and she wants to help. And so what happens next when these individuals are turning 18? Well, they're getting out of this juvenile facility, obviously. So what happens next? Are they going straight to prison? What are they doing? So Verna comes as then Verna Sawyer Carson with her new lawyer, who we meet in an older fashion, months later. And so, years later. It's neat seeing another character's origin, if you will. So Verna has this injunction where she has to see her son, but then the doctor in charge is saying, it could take another 3 months. I have to find the proper paperwork for me to open up medical files or something like that. Chaos. She breaks in, causes chaos. The patients come out. So Jackson, who's really Jed, but they were renamed when they got into the foster care system, is good friends with this character, Bud, who doesn't say much. He's just really tall, very large. He's just there, and he's the muscle, if you will. But he has anger problems as well as everybody else does. So at one point, you think that he's Leatherface because of like the mayhem that he ensues. But then eventually, it's revealed that Jackson is actually Jed from the Sawyer family. So as the escaping of the mental facility happens, which is cool because you never think that you'd see this type of thing in a Leatherface film, in a Texas Chainsaw film. Like, it's just not, it's something that didn't cross my mind, and I've never seen this film. I didn't see this in theaters. I didn't see this on its digital release. I don't even know if this was in theaters, to be honest. I have no idea. But it's neat seeing it because it's something you didn't think you would see in regards to this franchise. So then having Ike and girl whose name I don't remember, and then Jackson and Bud, and then the nurse, the four of them, and she is the hostage technically if she's the nurse and they're the patients, go off on a spree, and then of course they're threatened. If anybody tries to run away, there'll be no more, things of that nature. There's a whole Reservoir Dogs kind of like diner scene, which I thought was interesting. The chase continues. Finn Jones is in this. Love Finn Jones. He plays a deputy, so that's pretty neat. But then the bad sheriff is acting revenge yet again. It's a neat culmination point, bringing back then to the Sawyer house. What happens next when everybody's there, and then we know that this particular Leatherface character, how he became disfigured is because of a gunshot, which went this way and like blew out his face over here, and like he has problems talking because obviously he had a lot of mouth damage. So then eventually his mom sews him up, like getting all the stitches together and puts the straps on him to like hold everything in place till he heals and like stuff. And then he gets his chainsaw back, and then because he's now back with his real family, and then kills the sheriff, and the nurse is trying to sweet talk him or trying to convince him that you're good. I've seen you. You're good. It's your mom that's the influence. Don't listen to that crazy person. And he just goes kablami with the chainsaw, and then off goes her head. It's very interesting because you think there might be a turning moment, but there's not a turning moment because this is the origins of a villain. So then we get he's sewing the faces together, creating his first mask, and then trying lipstick on, using her bottom half as the half, and then the sheriff as the other half or something like that. It's interesting. You never thought to see the origins of the mask, the first mask. You never thought to see the origins of the character. You never thought to see backstory of the character. But why I say that is, and I'm thinking now in regards to other horror franchises. We see the origins of Freddy Krueger, how his mom was a nurse in a psych ward, and she inadvertently got trapped with inmates, during a holiday weekend or something like that, and just a horrid assault happened, and that's how he was conceived, and then born in the facility, because then she went crazy herself. Who else do we see origins of in the Rob Zombie Halloween films? We have a lot more time spent on a younger Michael Myers, which you don't see in the original ones. But that's the next franchise we got to see, because that's like 5-6 different timelines of himself. What else? What other villains are there? Jason Voorhees is just pure, we see the origins of him. He's the kid, he drowns in the lake. So like that's given with the character. Jigsaw, we don't really see his childhood, if you will. We don't really see Tobin Bell's John Kramer childhood. That would be interesting. I would love to see John Kramer as a kid, how that works. What was he doing as a teenager? That would be interesting. Scream characters, if we just start with Billy Loomis, you don't really see him as a kid. He's a teenager in the first Scream, but I don't know, man. It's just interesting watching the origins of a villain. It's interesting watching how somebody can turn into a villain, or in the flip side, how somebody who is a villain can turn into the hero. It's a very wonderful aspect of duality, and I love that type of storytelling. I absolutely love that type of storytelling, especially Zuko, Prince Zuko of the Fire Nation in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Best story arc in any character written ever. No contest. All hands down. No contest. Best character development ever in story ever. No contest. He went from villain of pure revenge to hero. And doesn't happen often. Loki is up there too. He's up there. Loki, the Marvel Cinematic Universe Loki, who now controls the timeline, is up there in regards to hero to villain to hero, like arc, up there in regards to story. Very rare you see that, but it's neat seeing the change. So if we can see the change from villain to hero, we can see the change from hero to villain. When there's light, there's dark. When there's dark, there's light. It's a balance. Force, right? It's the whole premise of Star Wars. The dark side and the light side. It's interesting. It's interesting to speak about duality. It's interesting to get into the philosophical aspects of duality. But that's why I like watching these types of projects, because you don't know the origins of these villains. You watch these horror villains and you're like, okay, well, they're mad about something, and the stupid teenagers did some stupid things, and how dare they do this, and I'm going to go on my spree of killing, right? That's what the horror villains do in a horror film. But why? Why did they do that? What causes them to do that? What was the moment where they needed to start doing that? You don't often see that beginning moment. And these Texas Chainsaw films have given us different versions of beginning moments, and I'm all for it. I really enjoyed this film. Not many critics like this film, not many audience like this film, but this was a good horror film. This was a slow burn, hour and a half, hour 27-minute, quickly paced first, second, and third act. I was never bored. I was never confused. You were presented information, knowing that other stuff happens in the film after this, technically, in 1973. August 18th, 73, that's when, the Sawyer family is then burned in this particular timeline, right after the events of Sally escaping. It's just a very neat thing when you have multiverse of horror. I just never thought of that, so I'm very curious what happens next in regards to multiverse of horror. We've had a lot of different horror franchises where we've talked about in regards to multiverse. So I'm curious what other horror franchises are multiverse, because this is another example of multiverse. I have one film left in our Texas Chainsaw Marathon movie marathon, the 2022 sequel film of the original timeline, I believe. I have to revisit that, which is just on Netflix. And I think it's also another hour and 20-something minutes. Very quick. And then we're getting into our Halloween marathon, and then we're leading up into our other horror films and shows and stuff we got to watch for spooky season, but we're getting there. So, Leatherface, surprisingly wonderful film. I very much enjoyed the story. Very much enjoyed the story. On to the next review. Mucho mahalo.